Welcome to the McEnulty Method. We're here with Frank McEnulty and Colin Sorrells, our financial experts, and they are going to expound on how you and I might live better financial lives. Frank, Colin, good to see you guys, or at least
Good to see you, Bill.
good to hear you, Colin. I understand you're joining us via phone.
Good to see you.
I'm anxious, Frank, that you gave me just a little taste of a letter or an article that you had read, and I'm just going to turn it over to you. This was pretty interesting stuff.
Well, this person's saying by the end of 2022, I will have made $350,000 before taxes as a sole breadwinner and head of household. This is a great starting point, and I'm very aware how blessed we are to be in this position, but I'm always looking ahead on how to improve. That's great. I currently have $88,000 left in student loans, which started out as $150,000. So that's also good, paying those down, and very little credit card debt. Perfect. Now, I have two auto loans totaling $170,000 for two electric vehicles at 5% interest. And they've recently been offered a $200,000 HELOC at 9%. Which has helped me bring down some of my monthly payments and do some small home repairs and improvements, but I want to make the right moves. And it goes from there. So, yeah, I like how it states this is a great starting point, making it $350,000 a year before taxes. Boy, I'd hate to think where they think they're going to end up, because 350 a year is pretty good for anybody,
Especially as a starting point.
right? You know, they obviously, if she, I'm going to say she because there's a picture of a woman in this. So, and I don't know who actually wrote the letter, but you know. What the two auto loans totaling $170,000, two electric vehicles at 5% interest. Boy, it's a mistake that I think everybody who all of a sudden starts making a lot of money is tempted to do, and many people do it. I'm making a ton of money. I can buy that really nice car. Maybe paying off the student loans first before buying two cars might have been a better option. And then, it said the car loans are 5% interest. And she's asking, should I get a $200,000 HELOC at 9%? Well, but if the HELOC's at 9 and the cars are 5, why would you do that? Why would you trade higher interest debt for lower?
And my guess is the student loan debt is not that bad. I mean,
No, the interest rate on that has been next to nothing. And quite honestly, if they were, they haven't had to pay those for 2 years plus, or pay interest on them for 2 years plus. And the amount of money that's being made, they should have continued making their payments on the student loans while there was a moratorium and no interest being accrued, so that 100% of their payments would have gone straight to the student loans.
If they'd hung on to that 2013 Prius,
That's
would have been in great shape.
Yeah, I've still got my 2010. So there's also, she's also saying that I've been presented with a few long-term real estate investment opportunities that are rental properties out of state and are currently bringing in 10 to 12% return on investment. So she's also thinking about getting money for those. But it goes on, but my biggest concern is that after paying taxes, 401k contributions, bills, savings, and mortgage, $4,500 a month, on paper, I'm paycheck to paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, I think this is a good wake-up call. It's like, well, you're making a lot of money. She may be making more money than she really thought she was going to be making. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm making all this money and I'm still feel like I'm paycheck to paycheck. So maybe this is a good thing. It's like, okay, slow down. Maybe now's a good time to think, because there's actually a concept called Parkinson's Law, which states that your spending will always rise to meet your income, no matter how high that income rises, if you let it. I had lunch with somebody today, and they know a professional football player that played, I don't know how many years in the NFL, but they made around $55 million in their career.
Wow.
And now they're broke. If it wasn't for their pension from the NFL, they wouldn't have any money coming in. I mean,
Yeah.
but for somebody, I talk to the students all the time. They're not making much money, or they're making part-time money and that, and all of a sudden they're going to go get a full-time job. And I teach finance students, and a lot of them are going to make $60,000 to $70,000 a year right out of college, which isn't an obscene amount of money in California by any stretch of the imagination. You're probably still living paycheck to paycheck if you wanted your own apartment, but still, it's really, you think, oh, I'm rich. Colin, what do you think?
I agree with that. And this is, I think it's interesting you bring up Parkinson's Law. This, the first thought in my head was too much, too fast. Sometimes, to your point, especially, let's just take the example of a college student, going from, you're working part-time, you're making minimum wage. So you're probably making 20,000 a year in California. And then boom, you're making 3 times that amount of money. And you're right, 60, 70 grand, in a vacuum isn't this obscene amount of money, but it is when you were making $20,000. And so, all of a sudden you have all this extra income and you just start finding well, how do I maximize it? How do I spend it? I get that car, I do this real estate investment. And, I think before you know it, you find yourself similar to this person, and it doesn't really matter how much you're making, whether it's 60 or 300, in a situation where you're spending everything you're making, and you do find yourself living paycheck to paycheck, which is why, I think we always talk about, you have to have a plan, because the plan doesn't just change, when you go from making a little bit to a lot of money, right? The actual volume of everything changes, but how much I'm going to save and how much I'm going to spend on this and that doesn't change. And that's why it's important to have a plan, I think, anyway.
Absolutely. So like I said, you can always spend it. It's harder to make. And then I think what gets a lot of these professional players is they forget that there's costs associated with all these things. So they buy a house for cash. Hey, I'm not going to have to pay anything else. But there's landscape, there's utilities, there's property taxes, which is a big one. It's knowing the cost behind all these things.
And I think sometimes, just using again, maybe this person who's making 350, let's say before all these things, you're going to make 350,000. I think sometimes we spend, our gross income and not our net income. And we don't take into account, things like the taxes that are going to come out. If I signed up for a 401k, that's going to come out. If I'm doing insurance through, my employer or whatnot, that's coming out. And, and then that's where you find yourself, maybe making significantly less than you initially thought. And again, finding yourself in that position where money's a little tighter than you thought it would be.
Well, we've all gone through the situation where we get that first real paycheck. We go, okay, and Bill, in my days, it was a lot smaller paychecks, but let's now, I made, you're getting paid monthly, right? And you're making 60,000 a year, you get that paycheck, it says $5,000. And it's like federal taxes, state taxes, Social Security, Medicare. And then, like you said, Colin, if there's 401k, insurance, it's like, wait a minute, what happened? I don't want to say it's comical to see the look on their face because it's very painful. But it's like, what happened here? Why are they taking all my money?
I had that conversation with a guy once. It really, a nice kid, but he goes, "Who's this FICA guy? Why is he getting all my money?" So we all ask that question. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for your insight and wisdom. And if any of us have a great windfall or start making $350K a year, we'll remember it. And thank you. We will see you next time on the McEnulty Method.